Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, June 5th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Coming up, in order to get big projects built, cities enter into what are known as project labor agreements, often with local unions who can provide the workers to do the job.
And what it does is establish certain labor standards for a construction project for the people that will be hired onto those construction jobs.
But is a project labor agreement working out in Fresno, where major construction projects are underway? We'll dive into that after this newscast. The Trump administration has taken its most serious step yet to claw back funding from the California high-speed rail project. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says the administration may pull $4 billion in funding after an investigation from his department. It claims to have found the bullet train has, quote, no viable path forward. The report noted delays, cost overruns, and inflated ridership numbers. Duffy gave officials with the California High-Speed Rail Authority until next month to respond to his report, after which it could cut the funding. The first leg of the rail has been under construction for a decade in the valley. An immigrant girl in Bakersfield can remain in the country for life-saving treatment. Immigration authorities approved the family's request for so-called humanitarian parole this week. KVPR's Joshua Yeager reports this comes a week after the family spoke out.
The approval means the family can remain in the country for another year. The 4-year-old's treatment for short bowel syndrome is only available in the U.S. Without it, doctors say she could die in a matter of days. Rebecca Brown is the family's attorney with the pro bono firm Public Counsel. She applauded the government's decision, but says,
this was avoidable. The family's status was revoked with no reason.
She says the family's story highlights the pitfalls of President Trump's immigration policies in his second term.
It just goes to show that when the government decides to move quickly, people can get caught up in that oversweeping action, who shouldn't be.
She says the family will have to reapply to stay in the country next year, depending on their daughter's medical status. For KVPR News, I'm Joshua Yeager in Bakersfield.
One of the teenagers charged with killing 18-year-old Caleb Quick in Clovis in April will continue to remain in custody. As KVPR's Carrie Klein reports, a judge made the ruling at Byron Rangel's second court appearance yesterday.
The judge denied a request from Rangel's legal team to get him released from juvenile detention. Attorney Mark Coleman represents Rangel. After the hearing, Coleman told reporters Rangel's background makes him low risk for committing another crime.
No prior criminal history, youthfulness, good parents, all of that points towards release. The only factor that didn't is the seriousness of the offense.
Coleman said Rangel intends to plead not guilty. Coleman also said that Caleb Quick was targeted over allegations made against him.
The allegations by the police is that this occurred as a result of a sexual assault.
Clovis police wouldn't comment on those allegations since the investigation is ongoing. Rangel's next hearing is in July. The other suspect will appear in court later this month. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
The city of Clovis spent roughly $21,000 on security for the state track and field finals last weekend, specifically on police overtime. The figure was released by Clovis Councilmember Lynn Ashbeck at a city council meeting this week. Ashbeck also criticized her council colleagues for taking center stage in the controversy over a trans female athlete. They had staged a press conference against the student.
Last week's chaos was damaging to who we are, or who we used to be anyway, as the premier community in the Central Valley. It likely left a pretty unfavorable impression on the visitors to our community, the 1,500 plus athletes and families and coaches who made the decision to come to Clovis for this event.
Ashbeck said she worried the city's involvement in the debate would jeopardize a $6 million contract with the state agency that brings statewide sports competitions to the city. And it's unclear how schools or the state will respond to the Department of Justice over a transgender athlete policy. The federal DOJ gave California school districts until Monday to reject a policy by the California Interscholastic Federation. It allows trans athletes to play in sports based on their gender identity. The DOJ warned schools they could face legal action if they continue to comply with the bylaw. KVPR reached out to several Valley school districts, but is yet to hear from many of them.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Body 20 in Fresno's Fig Garden Village, offering full-body electromuscle stimulation training sessions. It's a high-tech, time-efficient way to help preserve and rebuild lean muscle. Each 20-minute one-on-one session is guided by a certified coach using FDA-cleared technology. Body 20 accepts health savings account cards. More information available by searching the Fig Garden location at body20.com.
And now to our main story. 3 years ago, the city of Fresno approved a labor contract that would, in part, hire more local residents for construction projects. Think carpenters, iron workers, pipe fitters, and steel workers. These are all trade jobs that require specific training and often an apprenticeship. And they'd all benefit from more local work under the city's PLA, or Project Labor Agreement. The city of Fresno entered into this agreement with the Fresno Madera Tulare Kings Building Trades Council. They represent over 50 unions. This deal was significant because such agreements were previously banned in the city of Fresno, but a recent report to evaluate how the program's going has illuminated one key problem. There are not enough trained workers to meet local hiring expectations. But this isn't the only issue. Negotiations are now set to get underway to potentially revisit the agreement and make needed changes. It's unclear right now what those changes would be and how they could impact Fresno's construction projects. Much of this will likely be worked out after budget season, so later this summer or the fall. Julianna Morano is a reporter at Fresnoland who's covering these developments. Fresnoland is a partner newsroom of the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. Julianna joined me in the KVPR studios to explain why government agreements like this PLA matter. But she starts by explaining what exactly is a project labor agreement.
They are these agreements usually between some sort of public entity. In this case, we're looking at the city of Fresno's, but like transit agencies have them sometimes. The high-speed rail does. School districts sometimes. And then the other partner is usually either like a group of affiliated unions or a union of some kind. And what it does is establish certain labor standards for a construction project for the people that will be hired onto those construction jobs. So things like wages and benefits. And the payoff in return for the city is supposed to be that the project will be completed in a timely manner without strikes or lockouts or things like that. And then usually this is negotiated with each agency, but they usually have some sort of like targeted hire agreement built in as well. So whether that's like people from certain zip codes or backgrounds or targeted demographics, that will usually be built in.
Now, the city of Fresno has historically banned these sort of project labor agreements. This is relatively new, isn't it?
Correct. Yes. This agreement was passed by the city council in 2021 and then enacted in 2022. But you're right, before that, I think in roughly 2000, Fresno banned project labor agreements, but then later repealed that law like 14 years later after the state of California passed a new law saying that if local jurisdictions had laws banning project labor agreements, they would kind of bar certain kinds of state funding for those projects. So that was kind of what led to the reversal for Fresno. And then one of their big initial project labor agreements before this big citywide agreement came into play was for the Fresno airport expansion. So that was kind of the first thing that set this in motion.
Got it. Now, a recent report did show that the city sort of come up short on hiring goals pertaining to this project labor agreement, PLA, that was enacted in 2022, which you mentioned. What are some of the changes that have been proposed now to improve this agreement?
Right. So under the agreement, they kind of break down the local hire goals by different categories. There are journeymen, so they're the most experienced trade workers. And then there are also goals for apprentices and new apprentices. So those are people who are undergoing training to become those skilled trades workers. So the city did not meet the percentages that they wanted to have those positions be filled by city residents. So they didn't hire enough City of Fresno apprentices or journeymen on these projects so far compared with the goals they set. So some of the things that have come up in these initial conversations about how to come closer to meeting these goals, because it's a 5-year agreement and they have more time to try to meet them. One thing is that it's only triggered if a construction project for the city of Fresno costs more than $1 million or is estimated to cost $1 million or more. So that's one thing that's been debated. Should the threshold be lowered to kind of increase the sheer volume of projects? Others, including some city leaders, have said they want to see actually a higher threshold to trigger the PLA. So that would leave out more projects, but then it would be very big budget construction projects only. And they say like, oh, this would be easier for the trades union to manage this agreement with a lot of moving parts. So as we kind of alluded to earlier, there's also debate over the definition of local. Like I said,
local workers meaning.
Yep. How local hires are defined. In this current agreement, they're only city residents. And one example that the building trades union's leader gave was, he said, like, I live in the heart of the city, but I'm on a county island. So even under this agreement, I wouldn't count as a local hire. So that's something that's also up for debate. Should it be expanded to the county or something a little broader than just city residents? And then lastly, the apprenticeship pipelines here have kind of also been brought up, like the training opportunities and facilities that exist in the city of Fresno to become a construction worker. Is there enough funding to support enough training opportunities for local residents to fill these jobs? Because if the local unions can't, immediately have a apprentice available, then, that call would go beyond just the local unions and maybe someone from out of town would get hired. So that's those are the big 3 things being debated to change the agreement.
So basically, the threshold for what constitutes a project under this agreement that these union workers can work on, who qualifies as a local worker when this PLA is triggered, and then also just the pipeline issue of workers.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I especially want to talk about the lack of workers because the city didn't meet its hiring goals. And you spoke to someone who doesn't have union workers, but someone in the paving industry who said hiring local residents is hard enough. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes. So non-union contractors, of course, tend to be the detractors against these agreements. They tend to argue like, oh, it limits competition in the bidding process. It reduces like the number of bidders on projects. They also tend to argue that it raises the costs of construction projects, although there have been some academic studies that have disputed that. But in terms of the non-union contractor I spoke with, he said that, yes, like he also struggles to hire local residents. And one thing he pointed to was that, like, if someone wants to become an operator of heavy machinery, the closest facility that he can send folks to is near Sacramento. So just without immediately accessible training facilities for some of these trades, that makes it difficult to get trained here locally.
So I'm curious how this impacts taxpayers. Is the city using taxpayer money to pay workers in this agreement? Like, why should everyday people who aren't associated with the construction industry or understand our infrastructure needs, why should they care?
Right. I'm glad you asked, because it can seem very like wonky policy land, sort of. But these are public construction projects. So these projects also include like water and sewer upgrades and a lot of things that impact your like city services that are publicly funded. So yeah, even if you're not in the construction trades, it impacts you. And then like this is, part of the debate, but the question of like whether it ends up costing the city more to complete the projects, I think that is also something taxpayers probably have a stake in.
That was my conversation with Julianna Morano. She's been tracking ongoing developments with a major project labor agreement between unions and the city of Fresno. And that's today's show. If you have a story idea for Central Valley Daily, don't hesitate to reach out. Just email podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden, Carrie Klein, and KVPR, with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.